Good morning.
Everybody get up. Everybody get up. Wait a minute, cut this shit.
Good morning. Simon and I have been looking very much forward to tell you today about our transformation journey in Pandora with planning and with O9. The name of our program is called HERO. Stands for Harmonize, Elevate, Respond, and Optimize. And that's exactly the things we intend to do when it comes to our end-to-end planning transformation in Pandora. For that, we, a year ago or so, after a careful selection process, chose O9 to be our future partner on that. We will tell more about the story today and then double-click deeper into the value case. Before we do so, just a little few facts around Pandora and the strategy we do, because that's quite an important connect to the value case. Pandora is today the world's largest jewelry brand when we look at how many pieces of jewelry we get to our fans and customers every year. More than 100 million pieces sold and produced in our own facilities. We are closing up to a 4 billion euro mark in revenue, have 33,000 employees globally. A big part of that is with our own crafting and supply facilities in Thailand and in our stores, obviously. In our headquarters in Copenhagen, we are around 1,000 people that try and do our best to make this full value chain work very well. And the last but not least, on the glance numbers, we end of last year hit a milestone we are quite happy about, which is also important for us to drive a more sustainable way of running our operating model. And that meant that we reached our goal of using or sourcing only recycled silver and gold for our jewelry, which, we are quite happy to have achieved that part as well. Then a bit about our corporate strategy called Phoenix. So our objective is to be the largest and most desirable brand in the accessible jewelry markets, meaning we compete with real jewelry, real precious metal, but in what we call affordable luxury. So the price point should be accessible to the many. We give a voice to people's loves, that's our vision. And to do so and do that with success as a company, our growth pillars is to build a continuously stronger and stronger global brand, to be strong in our design and to expand what we are mainly known as with our bracelets and charms, but to become a full jewelry house. That was the teaser you saw in the video to begin with. We have big core markets that we aim to grow, US, Europe, but also new markets like Japan, Korea, India, and so on that we are expanding into. And then a lot around doing more personalization, including engraving on jewelry and so on, but essentially widening the assortment, widening the offer to our customers so that you can do more and more personalization with jewelry. To achieve that, we have quite a few foundational elements, and many of those we will talk about today because our planning transformation ties a lot to many of these things. So one thing is to excel in all of our value chain and how we achieve the growth pillars. Doing good planning is a lot about driving excellence in what you do. Then there's something around scale. We are in our market, in the jewelry market, the largest when it comes to both distribution and crafting. So how do we leverage that? Planning transformation has a big role to play in that as well. Then we have our people. It's a people's game. Without people, we will do nothing and we will achieve nothing. Digitalization, that talks a lot about using a more advanced solution like O9 to actually achieve good value and good outcome. A lot what Stefan also kicked us off with, the potential that more digital planning has to actually achieve value. We see the same, and that we are very much looking forward to actually start to achieve the value from in our transformation. Now, before we go deeper into the program itself, the last context I want to give you is what is it that's unique about Pandora's operating model? In our view, it's our scale both in distribution and in crafting, and the fact that we are what we call a fully vertically integrated value chain. 80% of all our distribution is our own stores, and all the manufacturing more or less is also our own, and everything in between we own. So the potential for us to really be good at leveraging that and be good at planning that throughout all nodes is quite big. That's why we see big value in doing large-scale end-to-end planning transformation. And that's how we then also set out the program that we will talk to you about today, is to really tap into that value potential and do it truly end-to-end. Not just bits and pieces of it, but full end-to-end. With that, I will hand over to Simon.
Thank you. All right, as Anders mentioned, this is exactly the core of our program, because we are really trying to bring our store colleagues together with our craftsmen in our facilities in Thailand. And that's why the core of our 09 program is also to replace essentially all the solutions we have today scattered across our value chain. We have 3 different solutions that we have implemented over time, and we see an immense value from just getting rid of those and getting on one common platform for us to actually make decisions and tie the value chain together. One of the key drivers, and Anders will talk a lot more about this when we get to the value case, is for us to become sell-out driven instead of sell-in driven. We come from being a wholesaler in many ways, but as Anders mentioned, we now have a huge store fleet of our own. And becoming a retailer and taking the sell-out signal and the consumer signal all the way to our manufacturing side, that's really what's underpinning this program and what we'll do in the first phase of the program. We're quite humble about the fact that an end-to-end transformation is a huge scope in and of itself. And that's also why we've been very conscious of not pushing the envelope on advanced capabilities. We really need to crawl, walk, run. And that's also why we do want to get to MEIO and all of those things where we can truly leverage all the stocking points in our value chain, but we need to do it at the right pace. So that's why advanced capabilities is later in the game. We need to get the basics right. Before we get to the value case, a little bit more context, which is quite important for the interpretation of the value case. So within Pandora, you heard about the Phoenix strategy before. That's a growth strategy. And one of the key things for the supply chain is for us to keep up with that growth. So really the scale element and the digitalization is a huge piece of this. And in Pandora, that means we essentially call it digital backbone. It's a lot of different programs that all will need to come to fruition for us to realize these scale effects. So that means right now we are in the process of implementing new WMS, TMS globally, new manufacturing execution system in our manufacturing sites in Thailand. We are, of course, doing the 09 implementation. We're building new factories and DCs. And then the kicker is, of course, an S4 program, full-scale global transformation. I mentioned this because 09 was the last program of these to get the green light, and that's on the back of a strong value case, because this is quite a bit to chew over for us as an organization, so an important piece of background. The other piece is the credibility we've built as an organization through integrated planning. So Hero is part of integrated planning, but integrated planning started almost 4 years ago at this point, where global merchandising was formed and supply chain technology was formed. And we came together across merchandising, supply chain, crafting and supply and technology, and actually started an agenda of delivering continuous improvements and collaborating together. And I think us having proven our worth together as a team has also been a huge part of how our value case has been interpreted, that we can actually generate value even before we made the big investments into 09. So on that note, Anders, let's look at the actual value case.
Yeah, so as you said, Simon, even though we only selected 09 as our vendor to help us digitalize the planning end of last year, we have been on this journey for probably around 4 years. To your point, Simon, that is when we actually, instead of working with systems and silos, work with separate function visions and targets and KPIs and whatnot, we decided that moving from a wholesale manufacturer to a fully integrated retailer that also do own manufacturing, we need what we named an integrated planning vision. So we essentially, all functions that were involved in planning within the company came together and created that, and that's our overarching vision, and we have shared KPIs, and that's where it started. We also knew that going with our blank faces and say, we need a big double-digit investment in planning technology to actually do anything. We said, there's probably more we can actually do in terms of how we work with competences, with people, with organization, with starting to prove credible value improvements, what we can do of just stronger processes and so on. So we started with that. So we spent the good first 2-3 years to improve and mature processes a lot, from SNOP to SNOE to MFP, open to buy planning and so on, connecting merchandise planning with supply planning much more than we did before. We focused a lot on improving and on creating stronger people competencies and organizations across that. And with that also to our C-suite could say, we have a ready organization that are capable of taking on more and deliver even more value. Because that's another part, a big part of this, we learned at least, is that if you are sitting in a C-suite making these decisions, you need confidence level that the money that you put behind it is well spent and your organization can actually put leverage from it. Instead of that, it's many millions put in vain and you get nowhere in terms of value. So that was important to us. That's a lot about the credible road to value. Besides that, there were a few other ingredients that we also put together in the value case when we started to create it, and what, even more important, so when we continue to maintain it, because you're never done with it. When you have your first approvals, you need to keep up and you need to constantly keep it refreshed and do talk into why should we still continue to do this and invest in this. Budgets are never done. They're always open for review. So that's why continuing to prove the value we can do, be a strong organization that can get value out of the investments that you do, make it also super linked to the corporate strategy. So what is the value linked to that you get out of it? Why should we do it? As the open video also showed, and what I told you about in the Phoenix strategy, then one of the big parts is that we are on a growth journey. We want to become a full jewelry house. We want to continue to expand our network. All of those elements to do that with profitability and best possible kind of cost management and PLN impact, good planning will make a big difference. So that's what we narrative-wise are always tying into the value case. How is that linkage? Besides of that, we try and keep a very simple program vision. I anecdotally once got told, I've been a born and bred supply chain guy all my life, that when I talk to sales VPs, they were like, oh, here the butterfly documentary comes again, talking about all the numbers and supply chain and whatnot. So keeping the program vision super simple. What is it we are here to do? For us, that's about product availability, the value of product availability in our operating model, and become sell-out driven, and the rest will flow. It's more complex than that, all of you know working with it, but for us in the narrative it's very important to be simple in it. That has worked so far at least. Then talking a little about the value case, how we build it. So as the same probably is for many of you, when you do planning transformations, when you work with end-to-end supply chains and so on, you often look at the supply chain metrics and say, what can you do to improve that? For us, it's the same as for many of you probably, around forecast accuracy, inventory turn, inventory value, etc. As a performance as a % of revenue, all the ways you can actually measure inventory performance, and product availability, service level. However, what 10% to 15% improvement means, and that is harder for the C-suite to understand. So what was super important for us is to convert that improvement into a top and bottom line impact. What does it mean when it comes to revenue potential, if we do it versus if we don't do it, not only here now, but also put the long light on and say, okay, if we look 5 years out in the future, with all the assumptions behind growth plans, Phoenix strategy and whatnot, how will our revenue and bottom line performance look like if we do this versus if we don't do it? That way of looking at it we have done consistently, and we probably review and update it at least twice a year as part of important check-ins on priorities, budgets, planning, and whatnot. So we always stay in tune and very updated when it comes to our value case. And to put good numbers behind that, we spend quite a bit of energy to analyze what is the value of product availability in our case. So for us, being a retailer, product availability drives conversion in the stores, conversion drives revenue. The question were for us, but how much is product availability part of conversion? Because could you sell something else? And it's not an exact science, so we did a lot of correlation analysis, different type of stores, different type of markets, some more mature, some less mature. And with all of that, found correlation factors where we said, okay, let's not overestimate this, but be safe and conservative. What is the correlation value between product availability and conversion, and with that, revenue? So out of that, we have a number where we say we roughly know what a % of availability is worth from a revenue perspective on a yearly basis for our operating model. So that's what we tie into the value case and use consistently. The same with inventory turn. What's the value of improving your inventory cover, your inventory value, and your inventory value as a % of revenue? So there's the obvious part that, of course, there's a real cash flow difference, especially when you put the long light on and say, in 5 years from now, how would it look with this or without it? But for us, there's also something about lower provision risk. With this and with better forecast accuracy, etc., we will run a more healthy inventory, with less of the inventory being excess, obsolete, and therefore sitting with a provision risk that hits P&L, EBIT directly. So again, tying it back to a top and bottom line value case. The last piece, which is also important as we grow, is that for the same revenue plan out in the future, if we need less inventory, we also need less production. So getting there will have a production cost avoidance, so to speak. And not only that, it also means that we will actually, to what I said, we will be able to, or we will need less production volume for the same revenue plan. That also means that we will emit less CO2 and be more sustainable. So all of that we tried into the, or tied into the value case as well. Then one small anecdote that I talked to Stefan about it last night is that when I attended the first AIM10X, that was actually Amsterdam last year. I must admit I didn't think too much about why do you call it AIM10X. Stefan explained it in his opening keynote and said, oh, that's actually interesting. Let me go home and do a math check around the value case we did. Does that aim 10x? And I found out that it aimed 9.7. So it was close enough at least. So I guess these 09 guys, they're not completely off of what is the potential in this. So we do aim 10x. We will continue to do so. And we will continue to nurture and keep up with our value case and keep relevance. And don't ever take for granted that you once got approval to do certain things in planning transformation. That can be taken away as well. Stay relevant, stay tuned with your value case, and stay sharp. That's our recommendation. Hand it over to Simon for final remarks.
All right, so just a few words on where we're at now and actually realizing this value that we have promised and estimated. So we've had our blueprint and design phase. As we mentioned, we're doing all these programs in parallel, new ERP systems and all that good stuff. So we've spent a lot of time getting those dependencies right and really understanding them, because it also comes back to the credibility. Those are some of the key questions being asked, and actually realizing this value is, are we in tune with how these different programs will actually come together and realize the value? So we've spent quite a bit on dependencies and those blueprints. That also means we're now in a position where the product teams or the teams building the solution are now off to the races. So we have 3 teams working now on replenishment, demand planning, and the supply and capacity scope. We will have hopefully the first release in Q2 of next year, with more to follow during 2025. So far, so good. And I think the final remarks is that, as Anders mentioned, this is never a done deal with the business case. These big programs, they move, and we see opportunities in the market to change it. And I think having built a strong foundation with the value case that's flexible enough for us to have those conversations quickly with the C-suite as well, it allows us to adapt and change our roadmap. And that's been instrumental so far, both the credibility and the flexibility and us having that conversation with our C-suite. I know we'll hear more about that later, so I think those were the final words from us.
Thank you.